So to start off, welcome to the Games of the Year series. I'm going to be going through games starting from 1972 with Pong, the classic game that kind of changed the map of gaming because it was the first massively successful commercial arcade game. Now, I'm going to have to kind of give a little bit of leeway to myself on how exactly I play some of these games, as in many cases they are not very easy to play in their original capacity. So, we need a little bit of grace, but I'm going to do my best to play them as close as I can manage to their uh, original quality, and if not, something that at least is very close to the original, perhaps just recreated in an online capacity on some of the older games. Now, as we get closer to modern, more recent games, I'll be able to play them in a more true capacity. For instance, on once you get to some of the consoles like Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES, 64, Game Boy, so on and so forth. Those, obviously, I'll be able to play much more true to the original. So this game, Pong, released in 1972, was created by Atari. It was made as an arcade box unit. They sold several thousand units in the first year, and it really did quite create a bit of a following. So I'm going to go ahead and play just a little bit. For those who don't know, it is another name that people often refer to it as digital ping pong, for obvious reasons, once you see here in a second. So the game is quite simple. You are in control of one paddle. I'm on the right side here. And you are just knocking this little dot back and forth. It's very straightforward. You play to 10. So the first player to 10 wins. And I just missed that one. So my AI opponent has already scored on me. Now, for those who haven't seen Stranger Things, you know that arcades were really, really huge in the 80s. But in the 70s, they weren't quite the massive success that they were later in the 80s. So this really was a part of a huge shift in culture as these were becoming more and more popular, and Atari played a huge Atari, being a manufacturer of quite a few arcade games, was a massive contributor to that movement. Now you'll have to give me a little bit of grace, because I do not write scripts for my videos, so I'm kind of going off the cuff on most of this. I do have a little bit of a fact sheet over here just for some more educational purposes. For instance, since I lost that match quite handily, I'll just kind of look over here and give some additional information. The game was inspired by a game in the Magnavox Odyssey, which had been called Tennis. And so when somebody had seen that game, played it, when somebody at Atari had seen that game and played it, they figured they would try their hand at it and try and make it a little better. And I would say with the subsequent commercial success that Pong saw, they did a good job with that. Now, obviously, this game is very simplistic to our modern standards, but at the time that it came out, this was nothing short of revolutionary. There was several games that obviously came before it. 1972 was not the first game ever released. Pong in 1972 was not the first game ever released. In fact, you can go all the way back to at least 1952 for one of the very first games released. It is called Tennis for Two, and while it may not be the very first game made, it is often cited as one of, if not the very first game made. And interestingly enough, it actually is quite similar to Pong, although obviously very dated. But it quite literally just has a glowing line along the bottom of the screen, and then there is a similarly glowing dot that just bounces back and forth. Now, there are no paddles, so when I was researching it, I was actually quite unsure how precisely it was played. But I could not find any way to play it, so I left that one off of my list. In fact, I had quite a hard time finding a lot of the earlier games in a capacity to which I could actually play it. I don't have an arcade system, and I'm not the most tech-savvy person out there to actually make an emulator working for the older arcade systems. I know they do exist, but I did not have the technical know-how, and perhaps even a little bit of the patience to learn how to do it. It looks like I'm having quite a bit of a closer game on this one. I'm doing much better. I'm actually in the lead now. Which, I mean, I imagine if I was just solely playing this and not trying to talk and read from a fact sheet, I'd probably be doing a little bit better, but, you know, it is what it is. So let me look over here. There's a couple other fun facts I wanted to bring out. So, yeah, 8,000 machines was how many were sold in 1972. Again, it was just a massive, massive success. It really did change the face of the gaming industry at the time. It inspired a lot of clones that came after it. The first test location was actually at a bar in Sunnyvale, California, Andy Capp's Tavern, which is kind of funny if you think about it. I mean, again, like I was saying earlier, the arcades were not nearly as popular back in 1972, so they had to find individual locations to start these arcade systems at. Now, obviously, arcades as a destination became a thing and became more and more popular over the years, but that was not the case earlier on. It's widely considered to be digital ping pong, as I think I already said. It was one of the first commercially successful games in history. It did later reach a home version on the Atari console. Now, that's the one that most people are actually familiar. Well, I don't know that I'd say most people are familiar with. I'd say quite a lot of people played it more on the Atari home console than in an arcade. Now, I don't have numbers for who played more, you know, at one or the other, but I do imagine that having the home console of the Atari did make it a little bit more accessible to people who perhaps didn't have an arcade, an access to an arcade, or maybe just didn't have time to take their kids to an arcade and spend the whole day there. You know, then you could get the actual Atari 2600 and play it at home. So again, very, very straightforward, pretty simple game. But it cannot be understated the impact that Pong had on the gaming culture that over the coming decades kind of took America by storm. Not just America, obviously, the world at large. So I just figured, you know, what better way to start off with one of the very, very first major commercial successes that we've ever seen. Well, not ever seen, I guess, but that really changed the map. You know, really had just such a massive impact. Every year or so, there's games that have big impacts in society. You know, I mean, you look at Breath of the Wild, which basically drove sales for the Switch when it was released. I know that I am 100% guilty of that myself. When the Switch was released, I bought it because I wanted to play Breath of the Wild. And even games like that didn't have the, I would say, massive cultural impact that games like Pong and later we'll get to Pac-Man had on society. It was something that was easy to play over and over again. It was easily repeatable. It was consumable. It was very simple to understand. The controls were intuitive. So it just really saw a huge success. So this is going to wrap up 1972 as no game in other game in 1972 comes even close to Pong.